Sir, we found it.
Government agencies have now cordoned off the area and are...
Light that came down. Jane, I think you want to see this. You alright?
You dare threaten me, Thor, with so puny a weapon?
What? He was freaking me out. Where did he come from?
Well, as an actor, I mean, there's probably no bigger character you can jump into than Thor.
Yeah, sure. It's certainly, big shoes to fill. It was 40, 50 years of comic book history, and, he's a god, and it's a lot of elements that were rather intimidating. But, the prospect of working with who I was able to work with and, the excitement of doing those things really became the focus.
This is the king of the gods. How much higher up can you go?
King of the gods, he's the father of the gods. The god of all things, I think they call him. Well, it was fun to do, I was offered the part by Ken Branagh, terrific director. And I thought, well, this is good, there's, as they say, no acting required. Good sets and good costume, wardrobe, all the armor. And terrific actor to work with, Chris Hemsworth, wonderful.
You're best known for your Shakespearean works. How quickly did you come aboard Thor?
Well, I remember back in the '60s, and Stan Lee, the way in which he described, this kind of version of Thor being a kind of mixture of Shakespeare and the King James version of the Bible. I thought, well, I kind of have been brought up on a bit of that stuff. When I heard about the character, it took me right back to being a kid, seeing the image of the massive man with arms as big as tree trunks who is struggling to control this wild Viking strength. And I remember images of rainbow bridges, of outer space, of a sort of psychedelic look to the universe, sometimes a kind of gothic look, sometimes a kind of primitive thing. And it just seemed like so crazy, such a sort of incredible montage collage of things that it was a quick yes from me.
We actually got to talk briefly on the set.
Yes.
And you are a nerdier Thor fan than most people.
Yeah, I know. I know.
That's awesome.
What's crazy, a lot of people don't believe it. They're like, oh, I doubt she read comic books, and then I'm all like, why would you doubt that? Like, that's so weird, but yeah, I am.
Darcy's not really a character from the comics so much. Did you have a lot of free reign to...
I did. I'm really spoiled. I did. And we had an extensive rehearsal process where she was kind of invented. Because her role was really small to begin with, which I expected. I just wanted to be in this. I didn't care. I was like, I'll tape things. I will do the things on the floor with the marks. I'll pull focus. I don't care. I just want to be in Thor. Yeah, so her role was really small, and it was originally written for a guy. And then as we moved through rehearsals, my real-life relationship with Natalie, because we've been friends for a long time, came through. And I think they realized that they could use that. And they did, and it just kept growing and growing, and somehow it ended up to be a bigger character, which is pretty awesome.
It seems like it must be a really fun character to get to lie.
Yeah.
There's something I loved about this where Loki has an incredibly three-dimensional arc where he's after one thing, but he's still sort of evil, but he still has some positive motivation. Can you talk about finding that?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, it's in the comics, really, that I found, is that there's, his credentials as a bad guy come from a complexity to his psychology, which is really deep and rich. He feels betrayed, abandoned, lied to, cast out, left in the cold, underloved, undervalued, and there's an element of, you have this wounded child inside one of the most intelligent beings in the universe. So you have the vulnerability coupled with that intelligence. I think, Kenneth and I always wanted to make him a really rich, motivated villain as opposed to someone cackling on the rooftops,
Well, tell me about stepping into Sif.
Well, it's funny. Growing up, Jubilee was my favorite character in X-Men. And it's funny because now there's this comic book called X-23 and she appears with Wolverine. So I was like, what? And I was like, in the one shot, right? So I got all excited. So anyway, we'll talk about that later. But stepping into Sif was like, it's like a dream come true. I was like, I've always wanted to play a superhero. It's always been my childhood dream. And now I get 3 weapons. Okay, which is amazing. And I'm wearing armor and all this stuff, and I'm really tall. I mean, I'm tall anyway, but with the shoes and everything, it was so awesome. And then I get to see all my friends dressed up as superheroes. It was like being in some weird childhood dream with everybody, and we all had our own weapons and everything. It was great.
Now, are you stepping away from the Marvel Universe until potentially a sequel, or are you involved in the expansion?
At the moment, my entire goal is to release Thor and then sit down and have a cup of tea. That's my big ambition in life, and so everything from here is a big, nice, hopefully a nice surprise.
You look at the Thor from the 60s, and he has the long blonde hair, and he doesn't have the beard, but you've very much become the character. How much input did you have in terms of the look?
You know, I mean, I certainly wanted to have a beard. You know, that was sort of one thing that they agreed on, you know, thankfully. But the hair and the costume and everything was really set in stone before I got there. I had to, you know, go and work out, obviously, and do that and try and feel the sort of physical side of things. But, yeah, a lot of it was already set in place.
There's something also amazing about being able to pull off scenes with these costumes that are straight out of the 60s Thor comics.
Yeah. And that's hats or horns off, rather, to Alexandra Byrne, who designed them. I mean, she's amazing what she did. I think she started work on the costumes about 9 months before we started shooting. And her fidelity to the costumes, I think, is extraordinary. The fact that she was able to build them, make them faithful to the image, and then also make them move, so that Chris and I could knock 10 bells out of each other, roll around in the snow, run and fight, and everything would stretch and move in a way that didn't look either baggy or stupid, I hope.
There's a lot of inside jokes, and I'm sure I only caught a couple of them in the film. Is there one in particular people should look out for that's your favorite?
Well, they should check out in the vault. When we first go to the vault in Asgard, where many of the treasures are stowed, they should have a little look there. And also the very first time we see Viking Earth, we should have a little look there as well.
You do not know what your actions would unleash.